Welcome to Apothecary After Dark, the official podcast of Amityville Apothecary.
This is what real witches talk about when the doors are locked, the lights are low, and the incense is still smoldering.
From spell work and shadow work to hot takes on hexes, healing, and everything in between, we're serving up magic, mystery, and a little bit of mischief.
So pour a cup of your favorite libation, light that protection candle, and settle in. It's about to get witchy. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Apothecary After Dark, the official podcast of Amityville Apothecary. I am Dina Rosenberg, co-owner of the Apothecary, and I'm here with my best friend in all things fun, magic, business, and trouble.
Always. Yes. Hi, guys. I'm Danielle Deasy, and I am so excited to introduce you to our guest, Antonio Pagliarulo. He is an honorary part of our family here.
He goes here. That's it.
He's part of our family. Antonio, we love you.
I love you too. Both. I mean, it's home. I always say the apothecary is home.
So Antonio just recently, is it officially launched?
I don't even know if it's out yet. Is it out?
Technically June 1.
June 1. Okay.
Okay, is the official date of his fabulous book, Queer Saints, A Radical Guide to Magic, Miracles, and Modern Intercession. He also wrote The Evil Eye, which everybody should have. It's his Italian folk magical craft of how to protect yourself and how to detect the evil eye and how to protect yourself from the evil eye. It's wonderful. So congratulations on both of your books.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So before we even get into the book, how did you come up with the title Queer Saints, A Radical Guide, et cetera, et cetera? Go on.
Well, I grew up with saints, traditional, Catholic saints, my whole life. That was always there. I was educated in a very, Catholic school. So we always knew, I always say there was never a time in my life when I didn't know St. Francis of Assisi, and I didn't know, the stories from, stripping down in the square to the wolf and everything else. And later on, when I, developed my own craft and followed my path as a magical practitioner, I started to look at saints who were gay and who were LGBT, and then later on it became queer, but saints who really resonated with gay men, and of course Saint Sebastian was always around, always there. St. Francis was always there, and then later on I started to look at other, ancestors who, from the queer sort of collective in the past. And I started praying to, Freddie Mercury, and who's my patron saint of cats, and
wait, so everybody that's listening right now, the meowing in the back is his cat Dolce. So as we speak about Freddie Mercury, patron saint of cats, that is Dolce chiming into the podcast as well.
Yeah, upset that I'm not giving her full attention, but
Dolce has a lot to say about a lot of things.
She has a lot to say, and like I said, she's seeing things. People float around the apartment, so she's getting a little bit crowded. Get out, she's saying. But I just started looking at some of the queer ancestors, like Leo Martello, and a lot of the people from the past who really made a huge impact on the community in general. And I started to work with them as a magical practitioner. And as the years went by, I started to develop a practice where I realized there were, tarot associations that, corresponded to a lot of the saints. So I started writing spells and using the saints in that tradition. And, there's the queer saints in this book. The book redefines the meaning of sainthood, and it sort of recasts the whole pantheon of saints, because this is about our modern saints, and that's where sort of the modern intercession comes from. I do write about a few of the traditional saints, and I look at them from the queer perspective, because being queer is not only about gender or sexuality. It's also, as I say in the book, it's the identity of the brave. It's people who rail against established norms, who, look at things that are coming in against rights, and they rail against that, and that's how we can really look at the traditional saints. I mean, St. Francis did that. Hildegard did that. Joan of Arc did that. These were all, in that way, they were very much queer saints, and they are queer saints. And then it all just came together over time. And I quickly, I wrote many meditations that are in the book, and just came up with a lot of spells and a lot of magical work. You have so many
spells and meditations and activations. You have the tarot associations. The book is so richly filled with so much information to inform and to add to your magical practice. So Antonio just spoke at our Alchemy Academy this past weekend. So we had a beautiful 90-minute conversation about your work that you led. And some of the questions were from people that, aren't like me, you and Danielle, because we all come from a family of origin that practice Catholicism. Right. So saints feel very natural to all of us, because when you're either an Italian American or an Irish American, there are saints around. It's just the way it goes. But some people that either come from a different religion altogether, maybe they are Jewish, or perhaps they come from a form of Christianity like evangelical Christianity, where the veneration of saints is really frowned upon. Yeah. Some people were having a little bit difficulty reconciling that. And you had some really great advice for those people. So what might you say to our listeners about working with either, traditional saints that have been canonized by the Catholic Church, or your newer definition of saint that maybe have never worked or practiced with them before? What would you say?
Right. A very important question. And what I would say is that, what is a saint? First of all, a saint is someone who has died and crossed over. They are a member of our beloved dead. They are incredibly powerful in death, and they serve as sort of, a hand, a bridge connecting us to the other side. They are our intercessors. They are our warriors, and our companions on this journey, not only in spirituality, but in life. And why would you want to work with a saint? Because they understand everything. Don't forget, it doesn't matter what faith you may have been raised in, or no faith at all. The bottom line is that saints, were once human. They lived here, just like, on this earth. They had clunky bodies, as I say, and they experienced every measure, of emotion you can imagine. They worked hard. They succeeded. They failed. They fell in love. They fell out of love. They struggled with sexuality. They struggled with desires. They struggled with vocations. They fought against patriarchy. They did all of these things, but they also lived their truths. They had specific visions about their missions, and their passions and what they knew they wanted to do, and they went ahead and they made those things manifest, And so all of the saints, whether they are the traditional saints or the queer saints, they were all human at one point. So whatever your issue, whatever you're going through, there is a saint who will understand, because every saint was once human. That's a lot different. And as a magical practitioner, I can also say that's a lot different than working with the deity. There's a big difference in that. It even feels different. So you have a saint. It really doesn't matter if you were raised in a Catholic family that, you're used to the saints, or one that frowns upon them. The bottom line is that saints are there for all of us. They're for the collective. They're our companions, and you call upon them and you work with them, and they will absolutely, the night that we came home from the weekend from the Alchemy Academy, I got back and there was already an email waiting for me.
Really?
Yes, on Sunday night, from one of the attendees who said she had, basically she worked some magic from the book, and had a very quite astonishing experience. A saint she had just decided to work with on her way home. She went home, turned on the radio, and sort of heard songs, and that she hadn't heard. And she wrote me this lovely letter, but she was already working with this.
I love that. Amazing.
this is kind of the doorway that you have with the saints. So if you feel like you can't work with them, don't, just forget that if you can, and remember they were human. So
Yeah.
they understand exactly what you're going through. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, they understand it.
I had run into one of the attendees that had come from an evangelical background, and we were like walking. She was coming from the shop. I was walking to the shop, and I was like, "Listen, treat it like a favor from a friend, maybe to start out with. You would, ask a friend to help you out if they had experienced something before. You would ask them for advice. You've been through this.
Mhm.
What did you do when you went through this?
Right.
And maybe and she was like, oh, that's a really great perspective. Because I think about in the very beginning when we even opened the shop, the concept of witch seemed really heavy because language changes as we move through time and experience and as we grow through life. And so in the beginning, we were like, oh, witch, it seems, and now we're like, witch, of course, we're witches. We do what we want, as Judica said, this past weekend. And so, they're accessible to all of us and they've been through it. And we're never alone because they've been through what we've been through.
Right.
That's a huge part of it. Yes. We're never alone.
I like how in the book you explain how to work, as you say, work with these saints. So for example, like I'm a huge cat lover, a huge animal lover. So if I wanted to work with St. Francis of Assisi as well as Freddie Mercury, who you put as like a modern saint, like how would one go about doing that? You want to give like a little sneak peek in terms of like petitioning or like the process or the expectation of my attitude when I approach this type of a request?
Mm-hmm. There are many ways, to do saint magic. I go over 3 particular ways in the book that I'm, very familiar with. And that is, the petition, the candle spell, and what I call the sacred sachet. Okay. It's sort of like the mojo bag, just a little bit more detailed in terms of the saint you're working with. But how you would go about it is very simply, you begin by deciding who you want to work with and petition or pray to or do a spell with. And you begin by then deciding, do I want to do a candle spell? Do I want to write a petition? What feels more comfortable? Because you have those options. For a lot of people, maybe writing a petition feels a little bit, easier than casting a spell or the idea of getting a candle and casting a spell. But if you want to write a petition, it's as simple as getting a picture of your chosen saint or saints, getting into a quiet place and literally writing out your petition, which I explain how to do in the book. If you want to do a candle spell, and don't forget, saint magic is folk magic. So it's very, very simple magic. You have the ingredients there. Okay. You don't require much more than a white candle and some sacred offerings. I give examples of sacred offerings in the book as well. You want to do that spell? You're going to do that spell with a white candle, with your picture of a saint, with your words, and with the offerings. Same thing for the sacred sachet. If you want to do that, which you can carry as an amulet or a talisman, or you can leave, beside your bed. You can hang it. You can put it in your car for safety if that's what you're doing. If you're trying for fertility, you'd carry it with you. You'd keep it in the bedroom. You'd keep it, in a place that matches what you're trying to go for. And I also suggest something that we mentioned earlier that I have been doing for many years, called illuminating. It's your inner altar, where it's a meditation and you go into it and basically you find that place that is your inner altar. And it might be, for some people, it might be, a little cottage on the beach. It might look like a night sky, in the outdoors in a forest. It might look like a really cute modern bedroom. It's all what you decide you want it to be and where you feel comfortable. And you literally illuminate that picture with candles. You have a soul candle. And once you do this meditation, it becomes something that you can visit and work with wherever you are. You don't have to be at this altar that you're literally building. You can, and that's a wonderful practice. But if you're, if you're online, if you're, in traffic, on an airplane, whatever it is, and you want to go into your inner altar and start working with your saint, you can do that because it gets you into a relaxed state. So there are many ways you can do it. I think the first decision is to the first thing is to decide. If you were going to work with St. Francis, absolutely, a lover of animals. His card for me is the Ace of Cups. I would get an Ace of Cups. I might get a saint card with St. Francis. And then I would, of course, get a picture of Freddie Mercury if I was going to combine the two. And I would literally begin looking at some of the examples that I've given in the book in terms of the petition or the candle magic. But these are simple practices. They're simple
My question would be for you. What saint in the book knocked on the door for you where you weren't like, you didn't maybe expect to include them and they were like, oh no, Antonio, you're putting me in this book. And maybe there's more than one, but I'm just curious if any of them just sort of like demanded.
Yes, they did. Well, I'm going to tell you the first one who really sort of demanded is someone who's a traditional saint who has always sort of had that queer vibe, and that was Hildegard. Just a visionary in so many ways for artists, for writers, for orators, for leadership, just so many different things. Her work was so incredible, and talk about somebody who railed against established authority and everything, and who fought for what she believed in. She definitely, I kind of knew that I would be writing about her, but I maybe did, maybe didn't. I kind of went back and forth. I thought maybe not, the traditional saints, maybe I'll just go completely. But she really tapped on my shoulder a whole lot. And I would have to say that, let me see. I mean, Freddie certainly did, because I had been working with him for a number of years. But I think when I think about it, I mean, there were a few of them. James Baldwin, certainly, as a writer, I certainly had a very deep affinity with James Baldwin, and felt that all the time. There's also a saint in the book from a while back who a lot of people don't always know of, named Public Universal Friend. And they, started out into this world as a woman named Jemima. Then they had something, a medical condition, and they emerged from that and said, I'm no longer a man or a woman, I'm Public Universal Friend. And
I loved reading about Public Universal Friend. I got such a kick out of that. Really, I did. I was like, how fantastic.
How fantastic. And they really, for anyone who works as a magical practitioner, for anyone who works with or wants to work with mediumship or trance, their card is the death card, because they literally lived and died. They were born and then there was rebirth. Who they were before died and then they were reborn as this Public Universal Friend. So there's this powerful image that you have with them on this journey, because they were reborn. It's the death card over and over again in their life. And they went on to do, people said, hey, you must be nuts. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You can't do it. But they did. They went ahead and did their preaching and did what they wanted to do. So that was also, they were another saint that really knocked, and I didn't expect that at all. When I was doing research, that was a shock. That was a big shock. Yeah. And then there were people in the book, working with the tarot, again, I didn't really know that I would put Saint Rachel, Pollock in the book. She was always a tremendous influence. Yeah. I was reading her books years and years ago. And then, I every time I go to my tarot deck, I remember things I've learned from her writings. And I think that's for a lot of people who work with the tarot. So certainly, Rachel on my shoulder.
You have so many, like even
there are many.
I think that people may be surprised as they go through it, because there's characters in here, people who are in here who were, pretty recent. So, for example, you have St. Louise Hay, you have St. Keith Haring, you have St. Frida Kahlo, that there's currently an exhibit in the city with. There's
and
St.
Frida.
Alexander McQueen. No, go ahead.
Yeah, Alexander McQueen is also, I should have, one of my huge ones. I mean, right beside me is a book about Alexander McQueen that I keep beside me, kind of all the time. What a strong, brilliant person he was. And I felt that very, very strongly. I started working with him years ago, but definitely felt a very, very strong affinity and have worked very successfully with him before. And you also mentioned, Danielle, you said Frida Kahlo. There's
Frida.
yeah, that the ritual that I put in the book there for creativity and resilience was really something that came to me while I was meditating with her. It just was sort of a download that it really came to me in that way. That's why I put it in the book, and that's something that you'll experience. People experience when you work with saints. They often get these really in your face experiences, and they go, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened." And I'm like, "Well, I probably will believe what happened, but tell me anyway," because that tends to be how the saints are. I always tell you, years and years ago when I was working, again, I still, one of my traditional saints is not in this book, not a queer saint, is Saint Therese of Lisieux. I have long had an affinity with her. I still do. One of the first prayers I ever did, it resulted in, I said, if it works out, I'm going to get a tattoo. That's how much I was, and then when it came to be, and I got that I worked the magic and got the miracle, I had to run out and get a tattoo. And sure enough, that's my sort of offering to her. And it also is about how we go about talking to saints, because as you said before, if you're raised in Catholicism or in any sort of Christian faith, we're taught a certain way to look at the saints and to interact with the saints, just as we're taught how to interact with spirituality in general.
It's very prescribed, right? So there's like a prescription that we're given to pray or to interact with a saint. And I think that for a really long time for me, even the word prayer had like this loaded connotation to it, because it's a very specific thing when you're raised a certain way. There's a way to do it, and the same with working with the saints.
There's a way. And what I discovered over the years of practice is that we were taught, and a lot of people do it, we were taught to beg. You go and you beg because you have this sense that you're kind of not worthy to be in their presence. You're not worthy of what you're asking for. You're not worthy of that miracle. So you have to beg. There's that supplication sort of thing that goes on. And in the sense of modern intercession, I always say, don't beg, because you are already worthy of what you want. And you have to go to that altar, whether it's literal or, metaphoric. You have to go to that altar already knowing that you're worthy. And you don't go there and beg. That takes, that's diminished vibration. And when you go there to that altar, whether it's in front of you or whether it's inside of you, you have to go there knowing that you're absolutely on this level where a saint is perfectly happy to outstretch that hand, because you're not less than, you're already enough, and that's exactly why you are worthy of that miracle. You get it not because it's coming to you because you're so sort of in need and so desperate. You get it because you're already filled with that magic.
I love that. And I think that's such an important reminder for everybody listening or watching.
In the famous words of St. George Michael, you got to have faith.
Yeah.
Faith.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly it.
Antonio, we can go on and talk about saints. I collect saints. That doesn't sound right. I have so many saints. I do. I do. I love saint statues. I love having them in my space and having them in the shop. If you've ever been to the back of the shop, we have so many saints. And we're just so delighted to talk to you. Can you tell everybody where they can find you? Obviously, they could find your books with us at Amityville Apothecary, but where can they find you?
They can find me at italianwitch.com or at its same website. It's AntonioPagliarulo.com. And there's a lot, as I said, coming in the next week or two, especially, there's going to be a lot that stuff doesn't always make it into a book, when you're writing it. But there are still other things that I want to share with readers. So there are going to be other spells, other things that I'm going to add onto my website that will be available for readers. So they'll be able to, get some more meditations that were originally, part of things that didn't, as I say, make it into the book, and now they will be on the website. So I'll be making an announcement about that when everything is up by ItalianWitch.com or AntonioPagliarulo.com.
And your Instagram handle?
Is Mago _MAGO Antonio _. But my name, if you look under Antonio Pagliarulo, you'll find me.
Wonderful.
And I do have to say, you have to give Dolce some treats for me for being such a good girl during this. And
she was, right up until she was.
she's like, come on, wrap this up.
I think
we are
Freddie
getting
was
to wrap.
keeping her calm.
Yeah, we are. Even though I am not identified as LGBT, Q, I think everybody will benefit from reading your book. So those of you who are listening, I don't think you need to say oh, I can't read it because it's not for me. I think
it's for everybody.
It's for everybody. And you did a beautiful job of really featuring some expected characters and many, many unexpected characters. And I look forward to really going through the biographies of each and seeing the corresponding spell suggestions and correspondences. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yes, it is definitely for everyone. A lot of people who don't identify as queer will absolutely find saints in there and meditations or spells or something that I know will resonate with them.
So thank you. We're going to pull a card from each of our decks for the collective.
What deck are you working with, Antonio?
Today I am working with the Medieval Scapini Tarot.
Ooh, okay.
Ooh, very dramatic.
All right.
Very old. I got this years and years and years ago.
Nice. I'm using Chris Ann's Lightseers Tarot.
I'm using my own deck, Crystal Keys Tarot.
This is so funny because I pulled this during alchemy too.
Oh.
Yeah. Sitting next to Chris Ann, which was kind of cool. So cool being amongst all of y'all.
What do you have?
I have the Four of Pentacles, and I love her interpretation in the art of the Four of Pentacles because normally it is referred to as the Miser card, where he's holding so tightly to his pentacles. But what I see in the interpretation artistically with this is she has her eyes closed and her head turned. So there is kind of a town behind her, and she's just calmly, independently, comfortably sitting, unbothered by everyone else and independent. And she's just cradling and lovingly holding her purse without any worry or concern, because what other people are doing is none of her concern. She's just comfortable in her own skin with what she has and just content with her blessings. And I think that's a really important reminder.
Yes, it's a very important reminder.
Yeah.
I love that card.
I have the King of Pentacles for the second time today because that was my card of the day for my daily tarot pull. So the King of Pentacles, which is corresponding to gold, which is I'm thinking about universal public friend is universal public money. The universal measure by which we, measure wealth. And I think it's telling us, to be content with what we have. And sometimes, there is an idea of, yes, we all want things. We all want more. We all want all of our wishes and our desires. And like you said earlier, we are worthy of it all, but also to have gratitude and to know that we have access to it already. It's so important. And it's powerful and magical.
It is. Yeah. I love both of those cards. And I pulled the Two of Cups.
Harmonious.
Love, because I really love, this idea. I always see the Two of Cups, of course, as partnership, but as a sense of harmony. And that's so important. And I think for me, it's always referred to either if it's a relationship, if it's a business partnership, there's a great deal of harmony there coming into it. But I also, over the years, I started to see this card this can relate to you if you're not in a relationship, and if you're not in a business partnership. This can relate to you just becoming a better partner to yourself, and really developing more of a sense of yourself, and feeling that cup, both of those cups full, because your heart and mind, your body and soul, whichever way you want to look at it. So, but definitely a harmonious card.
I love that. I love how it all ties together because 4 is stability. And I think it's recognizing our blessings.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thank you for that collective reading. That was beautiful.
Antonio, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners and our watchers for joining us on this journey. Make sure you comment, subscribe, share with your friends. We love your feedback. We'd love to hear more about who you want to hear from. You can find us everywhere at Amityville Apothecary or at shop.amityvilleapothecary.com. And we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Bye.
Love you both.
That's all for tonight, witches, but the magic doesn't stop here.
Be sure to follow Apothecary After Dark wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Leave us a comment or review. We'd love to hear what's stirring in your cauldron.
And you can always find us at shop.amityvilleapothecary.com or at Amityville Apothecary across all the socials.
Until next time, keep your wards up, your wands at the ready, and your spell work sharp.